The arena floated in the dark space like a burning star, massive rings of silver metal spinning slowly around a glowing battlefield at its center. Thousands of alien ships surrounded it, forming a silent wall of light across the void. Inside those ships were billions of eyes watching one single figure standing alone on the cracked black floor below. He was human. His name was Eric Vale, and he was barely standing. His armor was broken, his left shoulder bleeding, his breathing heavy and uneven. Purple dust from the alien ground mixed with red human blood at his feet. Around him lay the remains of warriors from species far older and stronger than humanity. Massive creatures with 4 arms, scaled giants with natural blades, beings made of living crystal. All of them had fallen. Only the human remained. A deep vibration moved through the arena as the final horn echoed across space. The trial of worth was over. A beam of pale blue light descended from above, cutting through darkness like a divine judgment. The air itself seemed to kneel as she appeared. The alien princess. Her name was Lyra Vathera, heir to the Celestian Empire, ruler of 1,000 systems. Her presence was calm but overwhelming, silver-white skin glowing softly, long strands of light flowing like hair around her shoulders, eyes bright as twin stars. She did not need armor. Power surrounded her like gravity. The galaxy watched in complete silence. For surviving what no species has survived, her voice echoed gently but carried through every ship and planet connected to the broadcast. You are granted one wish. The words settled heavily in the arena. One wish, anything, power beyond imagination, wealth beyond galaxies, protection for Earth, immortality, revenge, knowledge, even control over entire star systems. Eric slowly lifted his head, his vision blurred, but he focused on her. He did not look at the watching fleets. He did not look at the council ships hovering high above like judges waiting for greed. He only looked at her. Many expected him to collapse. Some expected him to beg. Others expected him to demand protection for humanity. Earth had always been seen as weak, emotional, short-lived, fragile. Humans were invited to this trial not as equals, but as entertainment, a species placed into a game meant to prove their inferiority. Yet here he stood. Lyra studied him carefully. She had watched every stage of the trial. She had seen him thrown into gravity fields that crushed bones. She had seen him survive freezing storms on dead planets. She had seen him outthink warriors who were born only for combat. He was not the strongest, he was not the fastest, but he adapted, he endured. When fear simulations broke ancient alien champions, the human had fallen to his knees, he had cried, he had trembled, but he had stood again. That was what confused them. Humans felt fear deeply, they felt pain deeply, but they still stood. The council ships pulsed with quiet tension. Many nobles were already predicting what he would request. They expected something dangerous, something political, something that would shift power in the galaxy. Lyra descended closer, hovering only meters above him. The glow around her softened slightly. For the first time, the arena felt smaller, more personal. State your wish, she said, her voice now quieter, meant only for him but heard by all. Eric swallowed, his body screamed for rest. His mind replayed everything. Earth's blue oceans, crowded cities, the mocking laughter of alien commanders when humanity was announced as a participant. He remembered why he volunteered, not for glory, not for fame, but because someone had to show them that humans were more than statistics. He looked at Lyra again, but this time he did not see only a ruler, he saw something else. During the trial, there were moments when challenges shifted unexpectedly, small adjustments that gave him a chance to survive impossible odds. Tiny delays in lethal systems, minor recalculations in combat simulations. He had noticed, others had not. Someone had been watching. Someone had been choosing fairness over cruelty. The galaxy leaned forward in anticipation. Ships adjusted position. Translation systems sharpened. Every being waited for the words that would change history. Eric took one slow breath. Then he whispered, barely louder than a heartbeat, "I choose you." The silence that followed was heavier than war. Across the arena, alien commanders stiffened. Council members exchanged sharp signals. Shock rippled like a wave through the fleets. The wish was not for power, not for weapons, not for protection. He had chosen the princess herself. Lyra froze in midair. For the first time since the trial began, her perfect calm cracked slightly. Her glowing eyes widened just enough to show surprise. No one in history had ever made such a request. The princess was not an object, not a prize. She was the Empire, bound by duty, bound by ancient laws older than most species present. Eric did not lower his gaze. He did not speak again. His choice was simple, clear. In the watching fleets, outrage began to rise like a storm preparing to explode. Some saw insult. Some saw manipulation. Some saw weakness. But in that suspended moment before politics and anger could erupt, something else passed between them. Understanding. Far away on Earth, millions of humans watched with wide eyes, unsure whether to feel pride or fear. If you want to see how this single whisper shakes the entire galaxy, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what happens next. Because the trial may have ended, but the real conflict was only beginning. Long before Eric Vale stepped into the arena, before the galaxy heard his whisper, humanity was never meant to matter. Earth was classified as a developing world on the outer spiral arm, technologically rising but politically irrelevant. The Celestian Empire did not fear humans. They barely studied them. To most advanced species, humans were emotional, divided, fragile, and dangerously hopeful. The trial of worth was not created for weak civilizations. It was an ancient tradition designed to measure dominance. Every 50 cycles, the Empire invited the strongest species from across known space to compete in brutal survival stages. The winner gained influence, trade privileges, military alliances, and recognition. It was not just a contest, it was a reminder of who stood at the top of the food chain. So when Earth received an invitation, confusion spread across the planet. Governments argued, scientists panicked, media exploded with theories. Many believed it was a mistake, others believed it was a trap. The official message from the Empire was simple and cold. One representative may enter, survival probability statistically low, participation voluntary. That line echoed across Earth. Survival probability statistically low. It was not an invitation. It was a warning disguised as opportunity. In truth, the Empire had different reasons for including human. Some members of the High Council believed diversity would make the broadcast more entertaining. A fragile species struggling among giants would increase viewership. Ratings across the galaxy mattered. Power was not only about fleets and weapons, it was also about influence. Spectacle maintained control, and nothing created spectacle like watching the weak attempt to survive. There were also political motives hidden beneath the surface. Several outer systems have begun questioning the trial itself, calling it outdated, cruel, unnecessary. Including a lesser species allowed the Empire to show how fair the system was. They could claim openness, claim equal opportunity, even if everyone expected the human to fall on the first stage. When volunteers were requested from Earth, the response was mixed. Many saw it as suicide. Some saw it as a chance to prove humanity belonged among the stars. Eric Vale was not the strongest soldier on Earth. He was not the richest, not the most famous. He was a former search and rescue pilot who had spent years flying into storms to save strangers. He understood risk. He understood fear. But more than that, he understood choice. He volunteered quietly, without speeches, without promises of glory. During the final evaluation, an alien observer asked him one direct question. Why risk extinction-level embarrassment for your species? Eric answered in simple words, because someone has to stand there. That answer was transmitted back to the Empire. Some council members laughed, others dismissed him as naive, but one individual did not laugh. Princess Lyra reviewed his file personally, not because she expected greatness, but because something about his psychological profile did not match weakness. Humans experience fear more intensely than many species, yet they also showed abnormal recovery patterns after trauma. They adapted through emotion instead of suppressing it. That fascinated her. When Eric arrived at the Celestian capital system, the difference between humanity and the Empire became painfully clear. Towers of living metal rose into space. Artificial stars powered entire cities. Ships moved without visible engines, controlled by thought-linked navigation systems. Compared to that, Earth seemed primitive. Other competitors arrived in war fleets, their armor engraved with ancient victories. Their species had survived extinction events, galactic wars, evolution on hostile worlds. They carried themselves like predators entering familiar territory. When they saw the humans stepping out of a modest transport vessel, some openly expressed amusement. The first stage of the trial was designed to test raw physical survival. Contestants were dropped onto a shattered moon with unstable gravity fields and lethal atmospheric storms. Within the first hour, two powerful species were eliminated when their heavy mass worked against them, crushed by sudden gravitational spikes. Eric nearly died within minutes. His lighter body was thrown violently across broken terrain. His suit cracked. Oxygen levels fluctuated dangerously. Instead of trying to overpower the environment, he studied it. He watched patterns in the gravity shifts. He noticed the storms followed magnetic fractures on the surface, while others charged forward aggressively. He waited. He moved when it was safest, not when pride demanded it. Across the galaxy, viewers began to shift in their seats. The human was not winning, but he was not dying either. That alone was unexpected. The second stage tested combat instinct. Teams were randomly formed, forcing species that hated each other to cooperate. Many alliances collapsed into betrayal within hours. Eric partnered with a towering reptilian warrior who initially saw him as expendable. During an ambush, Eric warned him of a hidden sniper using nothing but reflection patterns in the dust. The reptilian survived because of that warning. From that moment, the dynamic changed. The alien no longer saw him as weak, he saw him as useful. That was the first shift in perception. Princess Lyra observed every frame of footage in her private chamber. She noticed how Eric rarely acted out of ego. He calculated risks differently. He did not compete to dominate others. He competed to endure, to outlast, to adapt. By the third stage, whispers began circulating through the council chambers. The human had survived longer than predicted models allowed. Probability projections were being revised quietly. Analysts did not understand how his survival curve remained stable despite repeated disadvantage. But not everyone was pleased. Some nobles felt embarrassed that their genetically engineered champions were being matched by a species considered inferior. They pushed for stricter interpretations of the trial rules, insisting no external adjustments be allowed. They wanted the human removed naturally, so the narrative of weakness could be restored. What they did not know was that Lyra had already begun questioning the fairness of the system itself. Not because of Eric alone, but because watching him expose something uncomfortable. If a so-called weak species could endure through adaptability and emotional resilience, then perhaps strength had been defined incorrectly for centuries. By the time Eric entered the fourth stage, exhaustion marked his every movement. His name had become a topic across star systems. Some viewers mocked him still. Others quietly began to admire him. On Earth, hope spread cautiously. And in the deepest chambers of the Celestian capital, political tension began to build. Because if the human continued surviving, the final outcome of the trial would not just be surprising, it would be dangerous. No one expected him to reach the arena alive. But now that possibility was real, and the galaxy was beginning to realize they may have invited the wrong species for entertainment. They may have invited change. By the time the fifth stage of the trial began, the arena was no longer entertainment. It had become tension stretched across the galaxy like a wire ready to snap. Only 12 contestants remained from the original thousands, and among giants, predators, and engineered warborn champions, one human still stood, bruised but breathing. The next phase was announced with no dramatic speech, no visible weapons, only a single sentence transmitted into every mind connected to the trial. Stage 5. Confrontation of the self. Confusion spread at first because there were no visible enemies, no battlefield, no storms. Instead, the floor beneath the contestants dissolved into light, and each warrior was separated into an isolated simulation chamber constructed from living quantum code. The Empire called it the Mind Crucible, a system so advanced it did not attack the body, it attacked identity. For centuries, the Mind Crucible had ended champions who could survive any physical war. Species known for brutality collapsed within minutes inside their own thoughts. Because the Crucible did not show monsters, it showed truth. Eric felt the shift instantly. One moment he was standing beneath alien stars. The next he was somewhere painfully familiar. The smell of rain, the sound of distant sirens, Earth, a broken city skyline stretched before him. Smoke rising into gray clouds, buildings shattered, the sky darker than he remembered. A voice echoed softly, not alien, not mechanical, but his own. "You failed them." His chest tightened. The Crucible had scanned his deepest fear. Not death, not pain, but failure. He saw faces from rescue missions that did not end well, people he could not save, names he still remembered. The simulation did not exaggerate. It recreated moments with perfect emotional accuracy. The feeling of arriving too late, the sound of someone calling for help he could not reach. Across the galaxy, viewers leaned forward in silence. They saw only external readings, stress spikes, neural overload warnings, psychological fracture probabilities climbing. Analysts predicted his collapse within 3 minutes. The Crucible intensified. The city burned faster. Voices grew louder. Blame wrapped around him like gravity. Other warriors in separate chambers were already falling. One massive four-armed general began attacking his own reflection, screaming at hallucinated enemies only he could see. Another species known for telepathic unity shut down completely when forced to experience isolation. Their minds were never built for solitude. But Eric did something unexpected. He did not run from the fire. He walked through it. He did not argue with the accusing voice. He listened. His knees hit the ground once. His hands shook. Tears mixed with ash in the simulation. But instead of denying failure, he whispered to the empty streets, "I tried." The Crucible paused slightly, recalculating emotional resistance. The system was designed to break denial or arrogance. It fed on ego. It shattered pride, but acceptance confused it. Princess Lyra watched from her private chamber, her expression unreadable. She had seen warriors conquer entire planets, yet beg for mercy inside this stage. The human was not begging. He was remembering, and surviving memory was harder than surviving war. The simulation shifted again. Now Eric stood alone in deep space. No Earth, no arena. Only endless darkness. A message appeared before him. Humanity remains insignificant. Then another, "You will be forgotten." Then silence so complete it felt physical. Isolation. Many species feared extinction. Humans feared irrelevance. The idea that their struggle meant nothing. The Crucible pressed this fear relentlessly, showing timelines where Earth never joined the stars, where humanity remained divided, where his sacrifice in the trial changed nothing. His heart rate spiked dangerously. Medical monitors in the arena flashed warning signals. Council members began murmuring that the human would not last much longer. Then something subtle changed. Eric closed his eyes, not in surrender, but in thought. He remembered something simple. A child he once rescued, smiling despite loss. A team member who returned to work after tragedy. Humanity's strange habit of rebuilding after disaster, of trying again, of hoping without guarantee. He opened his eyes and spoke into the darkness. "Even if we are small, we still try." The void did not answer, but it did not grow stronger either. Inside other chambers, contestants were failing rapidly. Some suffered neural overload. Others voluntarily triggered emergency extraction, admitting defeat to preserve sanity. The Mind Crucible was living up to its reputation, breaking warriors who could survive supernovas but not themselves. Minutes stretched like hours. Probability models shifted again. The human's collapse window passed. Analysts revised data for the third time. An uncomfortable truth began spreading through council chambers. Humans process fear differently. They did not eliminate it. They carried it. They continued despite it. The final layer of the Crucible activated. A mirror formed before Eric, But the reflection was not wounded, not exhausted. It was confident, powerful, wearing Celestian armor. The reflection spoke calmly. You could be more, stronger, feared, respected. All you must do is abandon what makes you weak. It offered him emotional suppression, tactical enhancement, the chance to become like the Empire's greatest champions. For a long moment, he stared at that version of himself, stronger, untouchable, unafraid. Then he shook his head slowly. If I lose that, he said quietly, I lose what makes me human. The mirror cracked, light fractured across the simulation. The crucible struggled to generate a new scenario, its predictive algorithms destabilizing under a response pattern rarely recorded, acceptance without surrender, fear without retreat, weakness without shame. In the arena outside, a shockwave of energy pulsed outward as chamber walls dissolved one by one. Survivors were ejected back onto the central platform. Only 3 figures reappeared: a crystalline war tactician, a bioengineered predator from the Varnock systems, and the human. He stumbled as gravity returned, nearly collapsing, but he remained standing. Across the galaxy, silence returned once more. The stage designed to break warriors had failed to break him. High above, in the royal observation deck, Lyra's fingers tightened slightly against the railing, not in fear, not in doubt, but in realization. The trial was no longer proceeding according to expectation, because something the Empire had never fully understood was now undeniable. Humans did not win by being unbreakable. They won by breaking and choosing to stand again. Long before the arena ever saw a human standing at its center, Princess Lyra Vaethra had already learned how to hide her thoughts behind perfect stillness. From birth, she was not raised as a daughter, not as a child, but as a symbol. The Celestian Empire did not believe in weak rulers and emotion. They believed was weakness. She was taught diplomacy before she could freely explore, strategy before she understood friendship. Tradition wrapped around her like invisible chains. The trial of worth was older than her bloodline. It was sacred law, a demonstration of superiority, a reminder that the Empire stood above all. As heir to the throne, she was required to oversee it, to bless it, to announce each stage with calm authority. Her face had to reflect balance, even when the arena filled with suffering. But something had begun to change this cycle. When humanity's name appeared in the invitation list, Lyra had questioned it quietly, not out of sympathy but curiosity. The Empire rarely wasted invitations on species considered statistically inferior. There was no political advantage in humiliating the weak unless the weak had something unusual. So she reviewed Earth's history in private. Hours turned into nights as she watched human archives. Wars followed by rebuilding. Division followed by cooperation. Scientific leaps emerging from scarcity. She observed how humans responded to crisis not with uniform unity, but with chaotic persistence. They argued, failed, tried again. Their progress was inefficient, messy, emotional, yet unstoppable. It fascinated her. In Celestian culture, fear was chemically suppressed at birth. Leaders were engineered to think without emotional interference. Decisions were calculated, optimized, cold. The Empire saw this as evolution. But watching humans, Lyra felt something unexpected. A question. When Eric Vale's psychological profile reached her desk, it was unremarkable on paper: moderate physical ability, above-average tactical adaptability, high emotional depth index. That last detail drew her attention. High emotional depth was considered liability in the trial. It's something in the analysis suggested stability rather than fragility. When the first stage began, and Eric nearly died within minutes, she did not intervene. She told herself the trial must remain pure. But as she watched him study the gravity patterns instead of charging forward like the others, a quiet respect formed. He was not trying to dominate the environment. He was learning it. In the second stage, when alliances turned into betrayal, she saw something else. Eric did not manipulate his partner. He warned him of danger, even when it would have been strategically advantageous to let him fall. That decision made no logical sense in a dominance-based system. It built trust instantly. Trust, a concept rarely valued in the trial. As the stages progressed, Council members began whispering concerns. They did not like unpredictability. They preferred clear hierarchies, clear outcomes. But Eric's survival disrupted projection models. Each time he should have failed, he adapted. During one lethal storm simulation in the third stage, environmental controls intensified beyond normal parameters, not enough to violate rules, but enough to push contestants closer to collapse. Lyra noticed the irregularity in the data stream, a subtle deviation initiated by one of the High Council technocrats who disliked the humans' rising popularity. It was a small adjustment, unlikely to be detected publicly, but she saw it. For a moment she hesitated. Tradition demanded neutrality. The trial must not be altered for personal bias, but with silent sabotage neutrality. Her fingers moved across the interface in her private chamber. She recalibrated atmospheric density by a fraction, restored gravitational stability within acceptable limits. It was not favoritism, it was balance. Eric survived that storm by seconds, never knowing how close the margin truly was. Lyra told herself she had acted to preserve fairness, nothing more. But after that moment, she watched him differently, not as a participant, not as entertainment, but as a variable that challenged everything she had been taught. The mind crucible confirmed her growing suspicion. When she saw him kneel within the simulation, yet rise again, something shifted inside her. Celestians were trained to eliminate emotional vulnerability. Humans embraced it and continued forward. That was not weakness. It was a different form of strength. The council began pressing her privately, suggesting that the next stages should become more aggressive. The human has exceeded statistical entertainment value. One advisor stated coldly, "It is time to restore narrative order." Narrative order, meaning the human should fall before reaching the final arena. Lyra listened without expression. She understood politics better than any of them. If Eric reached the end, and worse, if he won, it would destabilize centuries of ideological dominance. The Empire's belief that strength meant superiority would crack. Other species might question their own position. But she also understood something else. If the trial eliminated him unfairly, the galaxy would see it, and doubt once planted could not be erased. So she chose silence publicly and vigilance privately, monitoring every code line, every environmental fluctuation, ensuring no invisible hand tilted the field beyond its brutal design. There was one moment during the fourth stage when their eyes met across a battlefield of collapsing structures. Eric had just pulled himself from beneath debris after shielding another contestant from falling wreckage. He looked upward briefly, scanning the observation decks without knowing why. For a fraction of a second, their gazes aligned through layers of transparent shielding and distance. He could not see her clearly, but he sensed something. She did not look away immediately. That moment unsettled her more than any political threat, because for the first time, she was not observing a participant, she was witnessing a choice forming within herself. By the time the final elimination rounds approached, tension inside the Imperial Palace grew heavy. Some nobles prepared emergency legal interpretations in case a problematic outcome occurred. Others began calculating propaganda strategies. Lyra stood alone on her balcony, overlooking the glowing capital world, stars reflecting in her eyes. She understood the weight of tradition pressing against her future. The princess did not choose her own path. The princess embodied the empire. But as she thought of the human who refused to surrender his identity, even inside the mind crucible, a quiet realization settled within her. If he reached the end, and if he asked for something impossible, the decision would not belong to the council. It would belong to her. And for the first time in her carefully controlled life, that possibility both frightened and awakened her. The arena had never felt so heavy. Even the artificial stars above seemed dimmer, as if the universe itself was waiting for something irreversible to happen. Only one contestant now stood at the center of the battlefield. Eric Vale, human, survivor, an outcome no prediction model had placed above 1%. The final opponent had fallen minutes earlier. The Varnock Predator, engineered for war and raised in zero-mercy systems, had underestimated something simple: exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, but mental pride. It charged one final time. Certain that instinct would overcome calculation, Eric did not meet strength with strength. He stepped aside at the last possible second, redirecting momentum instead of resisting it. The predator fell beyond the arena's boundary shield, disqualified by its own force. And just like that, the trial ended. Across 1,000 systems, silence replaced noise. Billions of beings stared at the lone human standing in alien dust, breathing hard, armor cracked, face marked with bruises that would become legend on Earth. Then the sky opened. Light descended in layered spirals. Not harsh, not violent, but absolute. The Celestian anthem resonated in deep harmonic tones that vibrated through bone and metal alike. The High Council ships repositioned into ceremonial formation, their hulls glowing with ancient symbols older than most civilizations present. And she appeared. Princess Lyra Vaethra descended slowly, not as an observer now, but as sovereign authority of the Empire. Her presence changed the temperature of the air. Gravity seemed to bend subtly around her. She wore no battle attire this time, only royal regalia woven from living star fabric that shimmered softly with cosmic patterns. She hovered above Eric, close enough now to see the exhaustion in his eyes, close enough to see something else that unsettled her, calm. The proclamation echoed across the arena, transmitted live to every system aligned with the Empire. The trial of worth has concluded. The victor stands before us. By ancient decree, the survivor is granted one wish, no limitation, no denial. The Empire shall honor the choice. The words were ceremonial, yet every council member understood their weight. This law had existed for thousands of cycles, never broken, never challenged. It was the foundation of the trial's legitimacy. Without it, the spectacle meant nothing. All projections immediately activated across council decks. Analysts running probability trees in real time. What would the human request? Military advantage, resource access, political recognition for Earth, defensive alliance, technological parity, even partial control over disputed sectors. Each possibility carried consequences, some dangerous, some destabilizing. On Earth, people gathered in homes, streets, command centers, holding their breath. For many, this moment felt larger than war. One man now stood in a position no human had ever imagined. Lyra's voice softened slightly as she addressed him directly. State your wish. The arena amplified nothing else. Even background hum from shield generators dropped to minimal output. Every being wanted to hear the words clearly. Eric lifted his head slowly, pain visible in the small tension of his jaw. He could ask for Earth to be shielded from invasion forever. He could demand Celestian technology to elevate humanity instantly. He could even dismantle the trial itself. His thoughts moved quickly but calmly. He remembered Earth's oceans, crowded cities, arguments, hope, fear. He remembered the way humans struggled against each other and still rebuilt together. He understood something now that he had not fully understood before the trial began. Power given without growth changes nothing. Protection without understanding breeds dependency. But there's something else. Throughout the trial, in moments when death probability spiked beyond survival margins, variables shifted slightly. Storm trajectories altered by fractions of a degree, simulation delays that bought him seconds, combat pairings that were statistically unusual but not illegal. He had survived through skill, yes, but also through something invisible that had quietly balanced cruelty with fairness. He looked at Lyra not as ruler, but as the only being who could have authorized such micro-adjustments without detection. Her expression remained composed, yet her eyes held something fragile beneath authority, a question. The council members leaned forward in their chambers, some already preparing strategic responses to likely demands, others calculating how to contain political fallout. Eric inhaled slowly. The simplest words are often the most dangerous. He spoke clearly this time, not a whisper now, but steady, I choose you. The silence that followed was not natural. It was shock crystallized into stillness. Council chambers erupted first, private communication channels flashing violently. Several nobles rose from their seats in outrage. The princess was not an asset, not territory, not technology. She was the embodiment of the empire's continuity, bound by duty to unite systems, to maintain order through alliances and arranged political bonds. In the arena, even gravity seemed uncertain for a second. Lyra did not move immediately. For the first time since her ascension to air, protocol offered no immediate script. Ancient law stated clearly that the victor's wish must be granted. It did not specify exclusions. It did not define boundaries for sovereignty itself. Across the galaxy, reactions divided instantly. Some species saw insult, a primitive human daring to claim a being of higher evolution. Others saw something else entirely, courage without calculation, a choice not rooted in conquest but in recognition. Eric did not step forward, did not attempt to approach her. His request carried no arrogance, no demand for ownership, only declaration. You could have asked for dominion. A council elder's voice cut sharply into the broadcast channel, breaking ceremonial protocol. Explain your reasoning, human. The arena murmured in low frequencies. This was no longer mere spectacle. It was political fracture forming in real time. Eric turned slightly, not intimidated by the amplified authority. You call this a trial of worth, he said evenly. I saw strength, I saw fear, I saw pride, but I also saw loneliness. She does not belong to be won, but she deserves to choose. Gasps rippled across alien fleets. His words reframed the situation dangerously. This was not possession. It was invitation. Lyra's composure trembled for a fraction of a second. Not from weakness, but from something far more unfamiliar, agency. For cycles, her life had been predetermined, alliances mapped before she could speak, political unions calculated for stability, her role defined long before her birth. She had power, yes, but not freedom. The ancient law pulsed across the central display in luminous script, binding, absolute. High Council members debated rapidly. Some proposed reinterpretation clauses. Others warned that breaking the law publicly would destabilize every allied system that trusted Celestian word. The Empire's authority depended on consistency. In that suspended moment, billions watched not the human, but the princess, because the wish had been spoken, but acceptance was hers. And if she said yes, the galaxy would never return to its previous balance. The silence in the arena did not last long. It shattered, not with sound at first, but with signals across the High Council chambers. Encrypted channels ignited in red bursts of urgent communication. Fleets shifted position in defensive formations. Advisory AIs began projecting crisis scenarios at dangerous speed. The human's wish had moved from shock to threat in less than a minute. Princess Lyra still hovered above the arena floor, perfectly still, but inside the Imperial network, chaos expanded like a spreading fracture. Several council elders demanded immediate suspension of the broadcast. Others argued that cutting transmission would confirm weakness, and weakness was more dangerous than outrage. The ancient law glowed at the center of the ceremonial platform, visible to all. The victor's wish must be granted. It had no exception clause for discomfort, no political escape route. It was written in an era when Celestian rulers believed their strength would always ensure safe outcomes. They had never imagined a scenario where a so-called lesser species would reach the final stage and make a choice that challenged the throne itself. On outer worlds aligned with the Empire, reactions varied wildly. Some war-focused species saw insult. Their leaders transmitted formal protest within seconds, claiming the human had manipulated royal protocol, demanding reinterpretation of eligibility boundaries. Others, especially smaller allied civilizations, watched with quiet fascination. For the first time, the trial did not look like dominance. It looked like possibility. Inside the arena, Eric did not move. He knew this moment was no longer about survival. It was about consequence. He could feel tension building in the air, energy shields humming louder as security protocols activated silently around the perimeter. He understood that if the council decided to redefine the law, he would likely not leave the arena alive. Lyra finally lowered herself to stand on the arena floor. a gesture never performed before during the conclusion ceremony. Traditionally, the princess remained elevated, symbolizing authority above the victor. Her boots touched the ground only meters from the human. Equal height, equal gravity. That image alone sent waves through the galaxy. A senior council elder projected his holographic form directly into the arena, breaking centuries of ritual separation. His voice was sharp, controlled anger wrapped in formal tone. Princess Lyra Vathera, the victor's statement exceeds acceptable interpretation. The throne cannot be subject to claim. Lyra did not look at the hologram immediately. She looked at Eric, and in that brief silence, something unspoken passed between them. He had made his choice knowing it could destroy him. Now it was her turn. She turned slowly toward the council projection. The law does not define ownership, she said calmly. It defines granting. Murmurs intensified across fleet channels. Analysts began highlighting historical precedents. None existed. No victor had ever requested something that involved the sovereign directly, because no one had ever believed it possible. The elder's hologram flickered slightly as internal arguments erupted behind him. The stability of the empire is not a variable for experimentation, he warned. Lyra's voice remained steady, but for the first time, something deeper resonated beneath it. Not rebellion, not recklessness, but clarity. Stability built on unchallenged assumption is not stability. Across multiple star systems, smaller civilizations began broadcasting supportive commentary. Quiet at first, then louder, they had endured cycles of Celestian dominance without question. Watching the princess defend the integrity of the law against her own council stirred something long dormant. On Earth, government struggled to interpret events unfolding in real time. Military commanders feared retaliation. Diplomats prepared emergency statements. But among ordinary citizens, something simpler spread, pride mixed with fear. The human had not asked for protection or power. He had asked for partnership. Inside the arena, security drones repositioned subtly, not attacking, but ready. The High Council initiated a procedural override attempt, a legal maneuver to temporarily suspend ceremonial authority pending review. If successful, it would freeze the wish until reinterpretation could neutralize it. Lyra felt the shift in the network instantly. The override required her biometric authorization to finalize. Without it, the process would stall. The council assumed she would comply out of duty. For her entire life, compliance had been expectation. She remembered nights studying governance models, lessons about sacrifice for the greater order, reminders that the throne did not belong to the individual but to the empire. But she also remembered watching the human kneel inside the mind crucible and stand again without surrendering himself. Strength was not suppression, it was choice under pressure. The override confirmation flashed in her vision, awaiting approval. She rejected it. The command was silent, invisible to the arena audience, but inside the imperial system, it detonated like a supernova. The override failed. Protocol recentered on the original law. Council chambers erupted in open dispute now. Some elders called her reckless. Others warned that denying the law would fracture allied trust permanently. Military commanders began calculating the risk of internal division if force was used against the princess herself. In the arena, Lyra faced Eric fully, the broadcast still live across the galaxy. "Do you understand what you are asking?" she asked him quietly, not as ruler but as individual. "I do," he answered. "I'm not claiming you. I'm choosing you. If you refuse, I accept that." That distinction echoed across translations in thousands of languages. Not conquest, not demand, choice. For the first time, the trial of worth was no longer about proving superiority. It was about defining it. Lyra lifted her chin slightly, addressing not just Eric, but every watching world. "The victor's wish has been spoken. The law stands. I accept." The words were simple, but their impact rippled across the galaxy instantly. Some fleets withdrew from ceremonial formation in protest. Others held position in stunned silence. A few outer systems transmitted public support, praising adherence to law above political fear. The empire did not collapse in that moment, but it shifted, hairline fractures forming in long-standing certainty. Inside the High Council chambers, the rebellion was not military yet. It was ideological. Questions once whispered, now spoken openly. If a human could win the trial, if a princess could choose rather than submit to expectation, then perhaps the definition of strength had never been complete. In the arena, beneath artificial stars and billions of watching eyes, a human and an alien ruler stood side by side. Not conqueror and prize, not ruler and subject, but two beings who had chosen against fear. And far beyond the capital system, in regions where Celestian influence had always felt absolute, something dangerous and hopeful began to spread. The idea that power might not belong only to the strongest, but to those willing to change. The galaxy did not explode into war the day Princess Lyra accepted the humans' wish. It did something far more dangerous. It began to think. In the weeks that followed, tension stretched across star systems like invisible wire. Some allied species temporarily withdrew ambassadors from the Celestian capital. Military fleets ran quiet readiness drills near disputed borders. Political analysts predicted civil fracture within the empire. But no fleets fired, no worlds burned. Instead, something slower and more powerful moved beneath the surface. Conversation. For the first time in centuries, the trial of worth was not being discussed as spectacle. It was being questioned as philosophy. What defined superiority? Was it physical dominance, technological advancement, emotional suppression, or was it resilience, adaptability, the ability to evolve when confronted with something unexpected? On Earth, the return transmission of Eric standing beside the princess became the most replayed moment in human history. Not because he had conquered the galaxy, but because he had not tried to. He had asked for something no one calculated: partnership instead of power, choice instead of control. That decision alone shifted how humanity saw itself. Inside the Celestian capital, change did not come easily. The High Council remained divided. Some elders feared that allowing a human so close to the throne would weaken imperial image. Others quietly admitted that breaking ancient law would have caused deeper damage. Lyra did not purge dissent. She did something more disruptive. She invited debate in a public session. For the first time, council deliberations were partially broadcast to allied systems. Transparency replaced silent authority. The empire had always presented unity as strength. Now it experimented with openness as strength. Smaller civilizations noticed immediately. Their trust did not increase overnight, but it shifted. Eric did not receive a crown. He did not command fleets. He did not demand titles. Instead, he requested cultural exchange programs between Earth and Celestian core worlds, joint scientific research initiatives, educational access for human students within imperial academies. His requests were modest compared to what he could have claimed, but their impact multiplied over time. Humans began arriving on advanced worlds, not as servants or novelties, but as participants. Their questions were different from other species. They challenged assumptions politely but persistently. They introduced inefficient but creative problem-solving methods. They debated openly in environments where agreement had once been expected. At first, Celestian scholars dismissed them as chaotic, but results began to speak quietly. Hybrid research teams solved energy distribution issues that had stagnated for cycles. Human engineers approached starship design with flexibility rather than rigid optimization. They accepted trial and error, where others demanded perfection before action. The Empire began to notice measurable improvement in adaptability metrics across several sectors. Lyra observed these changes carefully. She did not step back in a ceremonial distance. She remained present, visiting Earth personally despite security objections. Walking beneath open sky without armored procession, she saw human cities imperfect and alive. She witnessed arguments in public forums. Protests followed by reform are created from struggle rather than engineered harmony. For a ruler raised in controlled equilibrium, it was overwhelming, but it was real. In private conversations, she once asked Eric, "Why do your people continue when outcome is uncertain?" He answered simply, "Because uncertainty means possibility." That answer became quoted across systems. not as propaganda, but as reflection. Resistance within the empire did not disappear. A faction of hardline traditionalists attempted to undermine reforms by spreading fear of dilution. They predicted cultural decay, strategic vulnerability, but their arguments slowly weakened as economic and diplomatic benefits of collaboration became visible. Allied species previously distant began proposing similar exchange agreements, inspired less by romance and more by demonstrated results. The trial of worth itself transformed. Lyra proposed restructuring its final stages, replacing elimination-based supremacy with cooperative survival challenges. Some elders objected fiercely, calling it erosion of heritage, but when simulations showed higher long-term alliance stability under the new format, opposition fractured. The next cycle of the trial did not end with one warrior standing alone. It ended with multiple species completing a joint objective that no single competitor could achieve independently. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. Across distant sectors, worlds once intimidated by Celestian dominance began engaging diplomatically instead of defensively. Trade expanded beyond hierarchical structures into mutual agreements. The empire did not shrink, it matured. And at the center of it all stood something no model had predicted. Not a conquering human, not a weakened princess, but a partnership that redefined power without firing a single shot. One evening on the Capitol balcony overlooking twin stars, Lyra turned to Eric and asked quietly, "You could have asked for immortality, for command, for dominion over fleets. Why choose this path?" He looked at the horizon where light met darkness and answered without hesitation. Power can force obedience, but it cannot force change. Change happens when someone chooses differently first. Far beyond the capital, on worlds that had never seen Earth or its oceans, children studied new history records, learning about the cycle when a human survived the